Almost every piece of software is built on open source, but that also means that every application is built on a massive invisible supply chain. So, what is the software supply chain? We'll break it all down next on this episode of Open Source Open Mic.
This is Open Source Open Mic, the podcast where we talk about everything happening in the world of open source security. So pull up a chair. It's time for an open conversation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Open Source Open Mic. This is our first episode of hopefully many in this series where we will dive into trending topics around open source security, software composition analysis, and all things AppSec. My name is Andrew Garrett, and I am a product marketing manager here at Sonatype, and I am pleased to be joined today by Tyler Warden. And Tyler is our SVP of product here at Sonatype. He's based in the great state of Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Tyler, anything you would like to say to introduce yourself to our viewers today?
Just thanks for having me here, Andrew. I'm looking forward to the discussion today, and thanks everybody for taking some time to listen to us.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to dive into the topic of what is a software supply chain? This is a term we hear a lot in the world of AppSec. So, Tyler, why don't you kick us off? What is a software supply chain, and how is it similar or maybe different to a traditional supply chain?
So let's focus first on the key same phrase of supply chain. The supply chain is all the source material or raw material or components that you bring together to go into and help make the thing that you want to make. Let's anchor on a physical supply chain. The most, I think, famous example in all of our business cases at business school is a car. In order to make a car, we need to go and source a bunch of stuff. We need tires and brakes and rotors and metal and spark plugs and windshield wipers. And when a car manufacturer is making a car, some they make themselves, some they go and purchase, some they go and buy, some they go bring in. What they go bring in, that's their supply chain. And so just like a physical supply chain, the software supply chain is what are those components or dependencies or those outside things you bring into your product. And the vast majority of those raw materials are open source software components. So on average, about 85 to 90% of enterprise software by lines of code is actually open source. Look at all the lines of code in a piece of enterprise software. About 90% of those lines of code come from open source. Why is that? Because why would a car manufacturer make a spark plug when they could go get one? So that's how they're similar. But one very important difference is that if I'm making a car and I buy my spark plugs from you, Andrew, I know who you are. You're a business. I have a contractual relationship with you. I can evaluate you. I can interview you. You can pitch me. You can demo me. You can tell me. Well, with open source, it's you're just going out to the internet and getting basically a random piece of software to put into yours. So what do you do in the software world that's akin to what's in the physical world? The physical world, I can talk to you, interview you, do the demo, we can build a relationship. I can know you're a high quality supplier. Well, the software world, if it's open source, how do I do that? And this is where the similarities really start to break down because there's nobody I can call on the other end of it. I don't know if that component is good. I don't know if this logging framework or this API framework or this web component is any good. I just know that I can go get it. And so what we at Sonatype try to do is to help organizations, people, AI agents, AI coding assistants, security folks help establish conditions and regulations to essentially help them make that decision. Am I going to buy these spark plugs because they're the best for my car? Am I going to use these components that they're good? And if they are, we can help you make that decision. If they're not, we can help you see that and make a better decision. So a lot of similarities in terms of the foundation, but the application from a physical good to a physical supply chain to essentially an open source set of bits is where you start to hear some very important differences.
Yeah, I love the comparison there to the traditional supply chain. And I'm just thinking in terms of if I'm a developer, What are some of the components, and you mentioned some already, but what's
Yeah.
actually in the software supply chain for developers?
So as a developer, I am often doing one of two things. I'm either choosing a new component or more often trying to go to a newer version of an existing component within my landscape. And when I'm choosing that or making that determination, it's not just the component itself, it's turtles all the way down because that component has open source in it, that has its own supply chain, that has open source in it, that has its own supply chain. So we call those direct and then transitive dependencies. So direct is I'm getting my spark plugs from you. The transitive is in that spark plug is a filament and some metal and another screw. Where do you get those from? And so as a developer, it's not just the choice I'm making, it's everything that's inside that choice, all those materials. If you want to switch to food, maybe that's a better metaphor. If I'm a developer, I'm going to the store and I'm going to go buy a sandwich, right? I'm buying the sandwich, but in that sandwich is lettuce and meat and bread and cheese. And that meat has its own journey to get to my sandwich. The cheese has its own journey to get to my sandwich. So as a developer, what's in my supply chain when I'm making the component decision is not just that, it's everything that came into it. I may be buying the sandwich, but the difference here is I'm and the developer are going to be held responsible for also the meat and the cheese and the lettuce that's in that sandwich, not just the sandwich itself.
Yeah, I love that example, and I've also heard the example of water in the past. You turn on your faucet in the kitchen, water comes out, you get a glass, you fill it up. We trust that that water that we're drinking is safe to drink. But you go out into the mountains and you go to a river, you grab a scoop of water out of the river and you drink that. Do you really know where that water is coming from? You don't know if there's somebody upstream who is, dumping trash into the river and contaminating it. So, yeah, that's a great point. And let's stay on that topic for just a minute, but let's talk about maybe where things can go wrong in the software supply chain. And do you have any examples of maybe some recent current events or some recent supply chain exploits?
So I like to think about things going wrong in two buckets. Things that went wrong on accident and things that a bad person made go wrong. So let's start off with the one we think about. You hear the term vulnerability a lot. That's something that's done by accident. That's, hey, we've made this component, put in the supply chain. We didn't know at the time it was vulnerable. It could be attacked. It could be exploited. A bad guy could break in. We like to think about that as, oops, I left my window, the window on the second floor open of my house. I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't intentional, but I left it open, right? Mixing metaphors here. And sometimes those exploits, those holes can be pretty big. We announce to the world, hey, this person's window's open. I got to rush and go close that. Or a 0 day. You might have heard about React to Shell. That was one recently that happened toward the end of last year, that there was in React, a very common JavaScript set of libraries. There were some windows left open that people hadn't found until they did. So that was not on purpose. It was a mistake. It was bad code done unintentionally. Then there's open source malware, and this is when a bad actor makes a attack happen, and this is essentially somebody inside the house actively robbing you, right? This is the window left open. This is somebody breaking in.
Yeah,
And so
they
you might
broke
have
the
heard of.
window and made their way inside.
That's right. But what they did was even more nefarious than that. Imagine we're at this car company and a bad guy got into where they're making the cars and put a special latch on all of the doors that only they knew about. And they waited for you to buy the car and they just walked over and broke in. They knew that they could break in because they got it at the source. They poisoned the well upstream, so to speak. So, Shai Hulud, you might have heard about that one for the end of last year. And so when people think about protecting their supply chain. Historically, everybody thought about the accidental leaving the windows open, the vulnerabilities. Over the last few years, we've seen attackers say, well, corporations have done a pretty good job with firewalls and locking down a desktop. Where do things, where do they bring things in from the outside? Well, they get emails from the outside, so phishing happens, but the developers get a lot of open source components. So if I can poison the open source, the developers are going to bring it down because they need to, and then I've got keys to the kingdom, depending on how bad the malware is. So we should think about unintentional vulnerabilities, got to protect ourselves against those, and malware protection, which is as critical or more so as protecting ourselves against any other sort of virus or attack vector, whether that a malicious or a state act or organized crime is trying to use to drive a more broad-based attack against the world.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that, when I think about open source and how prevalent it is,
Yeah.
in your opinion, are we putting too much trust in open source sometimes? I mean, are we trusting that, hey, this component is, I can see that it is being used regularly. It must be safe to use. I should be fine. Is that a common pitfall for developers to fall into?
So I think it depends on who is the we, right? I think that there are very zero trust folks that don't trust anything and want to fully scan. And then there are others that say, well, if it's popular or it's the latest, it must be good. But you know who also thinks that? The bad guys. The bad guys know who is popular. The bad guy knows what's downloaded the most. So I think that open source is an amazing force for good in the world. We actually did a study here at Sonatype that if you took the economic benefit of just open source around the world, it was like the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world just in terms of the benefit of open source gives. And so it's an amazing force for good. So let's not overreact that it's all bad. It's an amazing force for good. But as with any force for good, it behooves us to have the proper guardrails and set of let's trust but verify what's coming in here, and let's absolutely no debate protect against bad actors that try to poison the well. Let's be sure we test the water before we give it to those who we care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times we hear the term DevSecOps,
Yeah.
putting the sec in DevOps, and trust but verify, like you said.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to talk about who actually owns the software supply chain.
Yeah.
Is it developers? Is it security teams? Is it DevOps? Is it a shared effort? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that the textbook answer is DevSecOps, sure. I think in reality, the engineering team is the one that is accountable for the software that they create. So I think, has the ultimate responsibility. DevOps is an enabling feature to help provide, or enabling group to help those dev teams work fast and work secure and work at scale, where application security is there to be sure that the verification takes place because it's a unique set of skills and input to go and verify. I think the buck stops with with engineering. If I had to choose one, the most effective organizations are the ones that are doing DevSecOps, where it's just part of the process. So really, it should be shared ownership. But engineering is the one that gets the tickets when something needs to change. They get woken up in the middle of the night when something breaks, and so it is the accountability, I think, lies with them. I think the responsibility lies with everybody.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned some of the studies that Sonatype has done recently, and we at Sonatype we recently released our State of the Software Supply Chain report.
Mhm.
I can include the link to that in the description if you want to check that out. But one of the big trends in that report is all around regulations and some of these new compliance requirements that we've seen emerge in the last few years. So I did want to ask you about that as well. Any thoughts on some of these new regulations and how they affect the software supply chain?
I think the regulations are starting to put some. accountability teeth in what regulating agencies doing. It's making some folks make a decision and care and get some visibility. DORA, CMMC, SEPI. These are things that are helping enforce or shine a light on some best practices that should happen. And I think the power of regulation is they can force people to act if they normally wouldn't. I think that it is in the best interest of many organizations to not rely just on the regulations, because what we found is good DevSecOps practices actually allow you to deliver faster, more innovation to market at scale. So it's I have this belief that businesses do things for one of three reasons: make more money, save more money, stay out of jail, and it's in that order, right? So regulations, stay out of jail, don't get fined. Yeah, that's good. But let's be clear, good DevSecOps helps with the number one, which is make more money, right? So I think that is regulations are good. I think that they're a good kind of reaction to what's happening in the world, and I'm all for regulating good software supply chain practices. I would just encourage, if you're listening to this, that there's actually a lot more benefit than just being compliant that can be had with optimizing your software supply chain.
Yeah, I agree. And what these new regulations tell me is, in the past, some of these security best practices were looked at as just that, right? They're best
Mhm.
practices. We probably should do them if we get around to them, but now I think with these regulations, we're kind of forcing people's hands where we're saying, okay, we gave you the option to do this, but now we're going to make you do it.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Another hot topic right now is AI,
Mhm.
and it's 2026 as we're recording this episode right now. AI is a trending topic. Maybe if you're watching this in 2030, maybe you're thinking, oh, AI, that's old news now.
Mhm.
But I did want to talk about AI and how it's changing the landscape of
Yeah.
the software supply chain.
I would think about it in three ways. One, there's a new class of suppliers. So it's like if every car manufacturer now had to put um, a rocket booster on every car, you would have a bunch of rocket booster manufacturers coming out of the woodwork, or wings, or hovercraft lights, or whatever, right? So there's a new class of input called AI models. Places like Hugging Face have emerged to be a distribution point for open source AI models. So you might have to think about bringing AI models into your business, into your organization. So now there's a new kind of class of supplier that needs the same supply chain governance that you've done in the past. So that's one. Two, um, AI allows more people to write code. Like it's easier to write code now, which means there's a lot more individuals that are having agents and assistants writing code, making a lot of open source decisions. So your exposure of how much you're ingesting from the outside world is a lot bigger. It's like if now half the people at Ford were building their could build their own one-off cars and going off and buying spark plugs from everybody, right? So there is this broadening of input. And then there is this kind of speeding up of decision making that means making a bad component choice, the cost of that is multiplied by a huge amount, right? It's like the cost of making a bad decision or the benefit of making a good decision. So you've got more code being written, which increases risk. Also, the bad guys have the same AI that the good guys do, right? Like anybody could go out to a coding assistant and pay them, and they could tell their agent to write whatever they wanted to, which means they could write bad open source components and that sort of stuff. Now, good news is I think that the good guys have the tools to go win in this case, but because of AI. But I think that we need to be more cognizant of more bad stuff hitting the supply chain, more easier to generate open source malware. So it makes protection that much more important. So think about more code being written, more inputs, a new class of supplier, and more ways to exploit. But also AI can be ones that help make better decisions faster, powered by the right data, and can help the good guys move faster too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we are running a little short on time here now, but I did want to end with some best practices. So, Tyler, could you give us a couple of recommendations? What, in your opinion, what would you say to security teams to help them secure their software supply chains?
Three things. One, choose fewer, better suppliers. What does that mean? Make better, help your teams make better component decisions up front and have less sprawl. So fewer, better suppliers. Two, know where your parts are throughout your entire supply chain. So when you bring a component in, where does it land? Where does it come in? Where is it used? And three, do not pass defects downstream. Now, those happen to be the Deming supply chain principles from the Toyota production system, but they apply here to the software supply chain as well. You might have heard shift left. That's just don't pass defects downstream. The better decisions you make earlier, right, the less costly it is to resolve them. And no matter where you catch them, it's better than letting them leave the factory floor. So choose fewer, better suppliers, know where your components are at all time, and don't pass defects once found downstream. Apply those principles to whatever tooling or processes you have. Those principles, I think, will make the most immediate impact to your software supply chain.
I love it. Those are some great recommendations. And Tyler, to wrap it up here, I thought we could have a little bit of fun. This is something that I call the rapid fire round. So
Let's
your
do it.
answers, it's 10 words or less for your answers
Okay.
here. What is the biggest myth about the software supply chain?
I don't need to worry about it.
What is the most underrated risk?
Technical debt.
What is the most overhyped solution?
Scanning your code right before it goes to production.
Okay. What's one metric that every CISO should track?
Mean time to remediate.
And last but not least, what's your final word of advice?
No, no, let's try. Good software supply chain principles help you go faster.
There you go. Love it. Well, thanks again, Tyler. This has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about the software supply chain. And to our viewers today, thank you for joining us on this episode. We hope you found it insightful. If you're not already subscribed to the Sonatype YouTube channel, we hope you will subscribe. Leave a comment down below or a question. If you have a question for Tyler, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you again on another episode of Open Source Open Mic. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.